One thing I always despised was seeing successful people hoard their wealth and power. But I also hated seeing them hoard their knowledge of how they gained that power. Or just give token half-hearted advice like, oh, work hard, I guess, ignoring if that advice is already outdated or if it only works for already affluent white men. I'm doing my best to be successful in what I do, so I figure I should start early and share the advice I have from my journey focusing on writing today. I'm currently finishing on my debut novel, a story about a homeless princess and a defeated warrior teaming up to take revenge on those who wronged them. It's set in a mythologized Bronze Age South India. I'm working with my wife and editor to have the final draft done soon, and it's really taught us a lot about the creative process. So I'd like to share what we've learned with you, and hopefully this reaches at least one person, and honestly that'll be enough. Just start. This is one thing I'm always on about with anyone who wants advice. You may never know what you're going to write, and you may hate seeing a blank page with that blinking cursor taunting you, daring you to try and write something. Personally, I love it because I can write whatever I want. But regardless, you just have to start sometimes. Some of us can spend years outlining, and then writing is basically the busy work of tying things together, and that's fine. It kind of goes into my problem with people world building too much or putting too much of an emphasis on it, but that's yet another video. But for those of us stuck on the what if this world building part doesn't make sense, or I don't know exactly what to write, or it's gonna suck, don't be afraid to just let it suck. Like I said at the beginning of my first video, better to get an imperfect video out now than a perfect video out never. All advice is relative, of course, but before I even started writing, the last book I read was back in middle school, Of Mice and Men, to no one's surprise. Yeah, I was a guy who never did his homework or read the books. Do your homework, kids. Seriously. I'd been brainstorming for years, and I had occasionally doodled some stories, but it wasn't until I started college that I noticed I just had to start. Long story short, I saw people with their magnum opus already done, and teachers pushing me to put pen to paper, and by the time I actually started writing, my work was crap. But, I kept writing. I wrote 10,300 words in one day just to beat a record a colleague of mine had. Good or not, I got a whole story down that wasn't even part of my aforementioned brainstorming sessions in just a year. I had a structure, plot, character arcs, etc. I kinda see now that just spamming out 100,000 plus words in 1 year doesn't produce the best result, especially when you haven't read a book in like a decade. It took my wife and I years to make the story half presentable, but I wrote and finished a book. That's not to say you should ignore problems to rush things out, or not take time to improve things and hold them up to a personal standard. Regardless, I never get writer's block now. Burnout, sure, yet I can always think of something. So don't be afraid to just start. You may only be able to get 100 words out today, and then have to wait a whole week, but after that week, you may get up to 300, and you can see how that will snowball. Kill your babies. Another piece of common advice, but I learned it's common for a reason. One day when I was back in my brainstorming days, I heard a voice in my head say,
"Holy crap, I can hear a voice in my head!"
Is it telling you my name is Dende?
Hush, little green! The voice speaks to me.
You're gonna have to change everything about Nin, the first story my wife and I made up, for it to be successful or good. And that has truly stuck with me. Looking back on what my wife and I's stories originally looked like, they're almost unrecognizable now. One of the characters in that Nin story went from being a god attached to a spaceship to just some kid with a robot hand to being axed completely. My debut novel went from being a semi-generic, kinda dark fantasy based on my wife and I's Skyrim characters, to a story about aristocratic and personal revenge set in a mythologized Bronze Age South India. Changing everything there has been hard since I practically wrote the entire story without much planning, but we've added and removed characters, sections, ideas, and entire chapters, so don't be afraid to just axe entire integral parts of your story. It's not like cutting out a heart. A book can't die. You can always just mash Control-Z, and you may find that the parts you ripped out were the tape, keeping the book from unfolding properly. And that god character from before, we used him later, and now he's the servant to the main god of all our stories. The Moksha to her Kuan Yin, if you will. Do the opposite. This is advice I've come up with on my own. It truly helps me write to do the opposite of what I feel I should do. Some of us can really struggle breaking free from convention. Not me, because I'm painfully contrarian. If you're saying, ugh, my character sounds bland, make them do the opposite of what they're doing. After all, the opposite of bland is interesting, right? A bit simplistic that, but I feel that simplicity works. It'll open up your creativity and help you see things in a new light. It's unexpected for this seemingly nice guy you had to suddenly stab the wonderful friends he's made along the way, but that's certainly not planned, and it opens up entirely new avenues of possibilities. Now you may find out he's been controlled by a villain this entire time. He's been collecting these powerful warriors who want to stop the villain so they're all in one place and can be removed from the villain's dastardly chessboard or whatever. Share your story. Don't be afraid to show it or talk about it. People are typically impressed if you're working on or have written a book. Even if they give no advice, sharing is good training to keep yourself from being embarrassed about your work. I've heard people say they're scared of their idea being stolen, and I can't really speak to that. I've never really seen that happen. Someone wholesale stealing a manuscript some Redditors put up for critique and crossing out the name. Even if they take your idea and run with it, I believe copyright law in the US now refers to the moment of the idea's conception or first documentation. So if you wrote a book and someone steals it, I think you can just show the court a Word document with a timestamped date of creation. Besides, if they stole the idea, well, there's no easy way to say this, but that's part and parcel of the business.
Okay, maybe my dad did steal Itchy, but so what? Animation is built on plagiarism. If it weren't for someone plagiarizing the Honeymooners, we wouldn't have the Flintstones. If someone hadn't ripped off Sergeant Bilko, there'd be no Top Cat. Huckleberry Hound, Chief Wiggum, Yogi Bear, Andy Griffith, Edward G. Robinson, Art Carney. Your Honor, you take away our right to steal ideas, where are they gonna come from?
How about ghost mutt?
Anyway, you can't let that fear stop you. It's like never leaving the house because of all the ways you could die outside. Yeah, you could get hit by a car, but those are just the risks we have to take. Also, they have to write an entire book based on your idea. You're already ahead of them, so they just have to catch up. And a few final smaller points here. Writing standards exist for a reason. You don't need to try and set yourself apart. If you're good, that will shine through. Don't feel you have to buck trends, unless it's something you specifically feel you want to do. It's like comparing yourself to Harry Potter or whatever. The publisher will see it if you're that good, or you'll just come across as desperate otherwise. Find a quick way to describe your book. I always had trouble with that, and it was always embarrassing when people would ask about it because I always felt like I failed in my pitch. It sucked, so make sure you always have some tagline to sell your book, some quick, basic idea. Never fear critique. I mean, do I need to go into this one? Don't start with your opus. We may have that grand tale of magic, whatever superpowers, I don't freaking know. We've prepared for years and worked on for years. It's the perfect expression of ourselves. But a producer I know made sure to tell me that I should start with something I don't care about because it will get warped and change and etc. That may be advice he gave me for films and TV, but it's still kind of true for books. You still have publishers and you're still going to improve as time goes on. Do you really want to start with your best ideas and present them in the worst way? Do your research. Look up other novels that are similar to yours, research styles, classics, methods, periods, etc. Or just read stuff from your genre before you write something. Looking at you, myself. Take breaks. Burnout can happen. While many of us hear about authors so devoted to their craft, it makes us look like wimps in comparison. Stephen King said that if you ignore basic stuff like washing the dishes to write, you're gonna look insane. And I think we can all say he's a pretty successful guy. And finally, make sure you're trying to work on your book. We're all busy. Those of us that aren't professionals have to go to work, school, take care of our kids, or just play a video game because God forbid we do something else that we enjoy. But we still need to do our best to set aside some kind of time. Don't burn yourself out or stress spending all your free time working on your art if that doesn't work for you. Just do your best to find time when you can. Any progress is progress. You'll get there when you can. Finishing a first draft is an accomplishment. Only 1 in 10 people finish a book they say they'll write, and only 1 in 10 of them actually continue to edit and fix their first draft. If you're not a professional writer yet, try to be professional. Dress for the job you want, as they say. Have a method, have goals and standards. Know yourself, what you can do, what makes your book work better, what makes you work better. See what others have done and try your darndest to get there. Honestly, I've seen a lot of people fail or give up because they're just not trying to be professional from day one. But go at the pace that works for your life, your health, and your sanity. So that's all I have for now, and I hope someone can get something out of my struggles and avoid the mistakes I've made. Or, improve themselves from the advice that I have here. Heck, even if you're not writing anything, I hope you can translate some of this advice to your own field of expertise, because you can do it, whatever it is.